Welcome to using Orchestrations v2 in Oracle Compute Cloud Service. In this demonstration, we'll use Orchestrations v2 to create an instance and set up all the required networking objects that enable us to connect to the instance using SSH. In this orchestration, we'll create an IP network and add an interface of that instance to the IP network. We'll also create a VNIC set, a security protocol, a security rule, and an access control list, or ACL. This will enable us to connect to the instance using a previously created SSH key. First, we'll look at the orchestration file, which is in JSON format. With Orchestrations v2, there are several features that we can use when creating orchestrations. One important feature is the desired state of the orchestration, which indicates whether we want the objects to be created immediately when we upload the orchestration. In this example, the desired state is specified as active, which instructs the system to create the objects immediately. For each object that we define in an orchestration, we can specify a label and a description. The label provides a reference ID, which must be unique in the orchestration. We use the label to reference an object in other objects. For example, if we create a storage volume, we can attach it to an instance by referencing the storage volume's label and its name field in the instance definition. The type field indicates the kind of object to create. In this case, we're creating a storage volume, so the fields within the template define the storage volume. The fields in the template vary depending on the type of object that we want to create. Effectively, any information we specify in a template is used to create the underlying object. We also have the ability to mark individual objects as persistent. This is useful when we want to tear down some, but not all, of the objects defined in an orchestration. If we specify that all storage volumes should be persistent, then when we suspend the orchestration, non-persistent objects, such as instances, are deleted, but storage volumes and the data stored on them are not. For example, this setup would allow us to modify an instance without compromising our data. Let's explore an example of object referencing. In this orchestration, when we define the VNIC set, we refer to the ACL that we also create in this orchestration. We do this by specifying the name of the ACL in the applied ACLs field. Consider the security rule that we're defining. Here, instead of specifying the name of the ACL, we reference the label and the name field of the ACL. When we use object references like this, we don't need to specify relationships between objects, because references are implicit relationships. For example, if an instance references multiple objects, including storage volumes, IP networks, IP address reservations, and so on, the orchestration waits for all of these reference objects to be created before launching the instance. In this orchestration, we define a number of different types of objects. First, we define storage volumes. We also add an SSH key, which we previously created. This is the value of the SSH public key. When we connect to this instance, the corresponding SSH private key is used to authenticate access to the instance. Next, we define networking objects. We create an IP network that we'll add the instance to, and we create an ACL and a VNIC set. We also create a security protocol and a security rule. The security rule uses the security protocol to allow access to instances that have an interface in the destination VNIC set. The ACL is used to apply a set of security rules to a VNIC set. Next, we create a public IP reservation. This provides the public IP address that we'll use to connect to the instance. Note that we set persistence to true for most of the objects in this orchestration, including the IP network, the security rule and ACL, and the public IP address. This ensures that if we ever shut down the instance, none of the networking is disturbed. With the IP address reservation set to be persistent, the public IP address of the instance won't change if we suspend the orchestration and restart it later. And finally, we create the instance. Note that most of the objects that the instance depends upon, such as storage volumes, the VNIC set, and the SSH key, are included in the instance definition by using object references, that is, by referencing their label and name field. This ensures that the instance is launched only when all of the referenced objects are ready. Now that the orchestration file is complete, let's upload it using the web console. Because we specified the desired state as active, the orchestration starts immediately. While the orchestration is creating the objects, its status is displayed as starting. When all of the objects have been created, the orchestration status changes to ready. As the orchestration starts, objects defined in the orchestration are created. The storage page shows us that the storage volumes defined in the orchestration are now online. The IP networks page lists the IP network that we defined in the orchestration. On the virtual NIC sets page, we see two vNIC sets, vNIC set 1 and default. vNIC set 1 is the vNIC set that we defined in the orchestration. The default vNIC set is created out of the box and a default ACL is applied to this vNIC set. This allows traffic across all vNICs in the default vNIC set. The instance we defined in the orchestration hasn't been added to the default vNIC set because we explicitly specified that it should be added to vNIC set 1. On the access control list page, we see the default ACL as well as the ACL that we defined in the orchestration, ACL1. The default ACL applies the default security rules to enable traffic across instances in the default vNIC set. ACL1 contains the ingress security rule to allow SSH access. Next, let's go to the security protocols page. Here we see the security protocol that we defined in the orchestration. And finally, here's the IP address reservation that we created in the orchestration. The instances page shows us that the instance is running. With all of the networking objects in place, let's log into this instance using SSH. We can look up the public IP address of our instance on the IP reservations page. To start an SSH session on a Windows system, we launch PuTTY and enter the public IP address of the instance. We enter the passphrase for the SSH key, and we're done. We've logged into the instance as the default OPC user. We can now proceed to customize the instance, install apps, and use the instance to run workloads as required. Now, let's say we want to stop this instance, but we don't want to delete the storage volumes associated with it. With Orchestrations v2, we can suspend the orchestration to stop non-persistent objects. Remember that we define the IP network and other networking objects, such as the security rule and ACL, to be persistent. Of course, to ensure data isn't lost, we also define the storage volumes as persistent. So when we suspend this orchestration, no persistent objects are deleted. Later, we can restart the orchestration to recreate the instance and any other non-persistent objects that were deleted when we suspended the orchestration. Or, if we no longer need any of the objects, we can either stop or delete the orchestration. If we stop the orchestration, all objects are deleted, but the orchestration itself is still available, and we can start it later. If we delete the orchestration, all of the objects created by the orchestration are deleted, and then the orchestration itself is also deleted. For more information about Orchestrations v2, see the documentation. Thanks for watching.